Hey guys, it's Carter, and today I'm going to be covering one of the most fundamental techniques in photography that has even been called the golden rule, and that's the rule of thirds. What is the rule of thirds? Well, in essence, it's a form of composition that makes subjects and photographs more interesting and aesthetically pleasing. This technique is done by dividing a medium into thirds, both vertically and horizontally, so that an invisible grid of 9 rectangles and 4 intersections are created. By learning how to position subjects asymmetrically in this grid, aka using the rule of thirds, you will immediately elevate your photography portfolio. But before we get into the nitty-gritty, we're going to have a short history lesson on the guy who is claimed to be the inventor of the rule of thirds. Or he's at least the person that's first cited talking about it. The rule of thirds dates back way before photography was invented. We're talking the Renaissance era. This guy named John Thomas Smith, who was an 18th century painter, engraver, and writer from London, wrote a book in 1797 called Remarks on Rural Scenery. In his chapter titled Of Light and Shade, Smith discussed Rembrandt's painting The Cradle, in which 2/3 of the picture are in shadow. He also emphasized the importance of subject balance in painting and argued that 2 distinct equal lights should never appear in the same picture. And this idea is essentially what formed the rule of thirds. Unfortunately, this painting is not accessible on the internet, but to help you visualize what the rule of thirds looked like in Renaissance paintings, here are a few famous historic examples. Now let's take a look at this painting from Renoir called On the Grass. Looking at it with the invisible grid, notice how the 2 women are positioned along multiple lines of the grid. Here's another example from Turner called The Fighting Temeraire. This is a landscape painting instead of one with 2-person subjects. Looking at the grid, you can see how the ship intersects the upper and lower horizontal line, and the girl is positioned in the right corner of the foreground. This makes for a very interesting composition that is also aesthetically pleasing. Now we're ready to take a look at how the rule of thirds is applied to photography. If you're shooting with a DSLR camera, chances are your camera already has a rule of thirds function, or a grid overlay that appears on the digital screen so you can position your subjects well. This is just something you need to turn on if you haven't already. But in 2020, you don't have to have a fancy camera to take good pictures. You can just use your smartphone. This is how to turn on your grid if you have an iPhone. So here's a screen capture of my settings. Once you're in your settings, you're going to open the camera function, then select the grid option. You can see I've already turned it on, but I'm going to turn it on and off again just to show you what to do. And now go to your camera and voila, the grid is on. Now we're going to take a look at a few examples of photographs that use the rule of thirds well. Take a look at this landscape with a tree. In the image, the horizon is near the bottom line, and the tree, the subject, intersects 2 focal points. The sun also doesn't intersect, but is divided by the lower vertical line. This is a really good use of asymmetry for the rule of thirds. Now we'll take a look at a portrait image. You can see that the man's face intersects the top right focal point. And this is great because in a portrait photo, you want the eyes of the subject to be near a point of interest. Also, the use of colors in this is fantastic. But say you're taking a picture and the person is in the middle. What do? Just ask your subject to lean in and throw the photo a little bit off balance. Another great thing about the rule of thirds is you can apply it to images you've already taken, and you just need to crop them. Here's an example. This is the landscape shot uncropped, and here is the landscape shot cropped to the rule of thirds. Look how much better the second cropped image is. The horizon line is now the upper horizon. This adds emphasis to the foreground mountains, which intersect the lower point of interest. Now you're ready to go out and shoot, or just edit some of your old pictures. You don't always have to use the rule of thirds in photography, but it's a great technique for a beginner to use to make their pictures more interesting, and many experts love it too. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll be back next week for the second video in my photography series, Enhancing Color and Light.